Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Michael Kelly, and joining us this evening from the Royal Australian Navy is Commodore Scott Lockie. We are honoured to acknowledge Dr. Jamie Morin, Director, Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation, and the accompanying American delegation. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During the ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations over more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths of floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Ernest Smiles. Ernest Pearce Smiles was born in Albury, New South Wales in 1885, one of 10 children to Thomas and Bridget Smiles. Ernest's father had been born in Queanbeyan and began working with a newspaper in Tumut before moving to Albury, where he established a distinguished career as a printer and sports writer for the Albury Banner. Ernest attended St Patrick Boys School in Albury and went on to become a boundary rider. Ernest was the second Smiles brother to enlist in the Australian Imperial Force, following his youngest brother Len, who had joined shortly after war broke out. Ernest was posted to the 13th Battalion and underwent a brief period of training in Australia before being sent for overseas service. Private Smiles first went to Egypt, where he had the chance to catch up with his brother Len, who was serving with the 2nd Battalion, and do some sightseeing. He wrote of crossing the Nile, saying, "I might tell you the scenery along its banks is a perfect landscape, well worth seeing." And compared to the zoo and botanical gardens, he compared the zoo and botanical gardens favourably with those in Sydney. He also wrote, "We have been doing some good work here in our training, which includes plenty of desert marching. We were anxious to leave Australia to get here, and now we are anxious to leave here for the firing line. Of course, there are some who would like to go back home, but not a Smiles until the war is over. It will be a pleasure to go back to our dear native land then." Smiles was with the 13th Battalion when they landed on Gallipoli on the afternoon of the 25th of April 1915. He wrote, "We had a hot reception, the bullets floating through the air like swarms of bees, but we gave the Turks something to remember, and we will give them plenty more before this war is over. The casualties were heavy, but the Australians that landed in that terrible hail of lead made a name for themselves that will never die." Private Smiles survived that first day, but later in June, after going in search of Len, he discovered his brother had been wounded and sent to hospital in Egypt, dying of his wounds on the 2nd of May 1915 at the age of 20. Ernest wrote, "After being in the hospital for 5 days, poor Len knew he was done and told the chap to find the 13th Battalion when he returned to Gallipoli and inquire for me and tell me he was done. Poor fellow, he missed his VC and stopped a bullet." Following the evacuation, Ernest Smiles was transferred to the 4th Pioneer Battalion and arrived in France in June 1916. By that stage, his older brother Frank had also enlisted in the AIF and was serving in the 19th Battalion. The first major operation Ernest participated in was near the French village of Pozières and nearby Mouquet Farm. On the 6th of August 1916, Smiles was too close to a high-explosive artillery shell blast and was badly wounded in the arms and legs. He died of his wounds later that day at a nearby casualty clearing station. He was 29 years old. Private Frank Smiles, the third Smiles brother serving in the AIF, was reported missing in November, and it was later determined that he had died of wounds while a prisoner of the Germans. Ernest Smiles' name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among the more than 60,000 Australians who died during the First World War. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Ernest Pearce Smiles, his brothers Private Leonard Kerry Smiles and Frank Stanley Smiles, who gave their lives for us, for our freedoms, and in hope of a better world. They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. Thank you for visiting the War Memorial today, and good evening.